Здравствуйте, товарищи на интернет. Меня зовут Amateur Historian, и добро пожаловать в Ubuntu Nazbol. If you spent any time looking at political memes on the internet, you'll have heard of a term, Nazbol. Yes, from Shrek to Seraph, these syncretic boys are mocked near relentlessly. So why? The purpose of this video is to give a brief rundown of the history of Nazbols, and to help those justifiably confused at what Nazbols wants, begin to understand the insanity of syncretic politics. So, the hell is a Nazbol? Nazbol stands for National Bolshevik, and that's about all that makes sense when it comes to this ideology. National Bolshevism is a syncretic ideology, meaning it combines elements from both ends of the political spectrum, in this case, ultranationalism and broad Bolshevism. The term was coined in Germany, but it was only ever notable in Russia and a few ex-Soviet states. In the modern era, their radicalism has been viewed humorously by Westerners, primarily thanks to how hard syncretic politics tend to be to understand. The first use of the term National Bolshevik comes out of late World War I Germany as a term to deride the Communist Workers' Party of Germany, which was a nationalist pro-war splinter faction of the Communist Party of Germany. However, German syncretic politics would shift further right and become the Strasserist with the rise of everyone's favourite Austrian. The next notable use of National Bolshevik comes from the last days of the Russian Civil War. An array of high-ranking nationalist white leaders would defect to the Bolshevik Red Army. These leaders had grown to despise the extreme bloodshed of the Civil War, and began to believe that a stable socialist government was the only way to, quote-unquote, restore Russian dominance. Among nationalist communists who defected, there are two most notable examples. D.S. Merky, who had influenced the Mladrossi movement, which is its own video, and Professor Nikolai Ostrelov. Ostrelov was originally die-hard anti-communist, but began to believe that Bolshevik communism could be used for ultranationalistic purposes. He can be considered the first self-ascribed national Bolshevik. Later on, with the rise of Stalin and the next notable uptick of national Bolshevism occurred. Stalin's whole socialism in one country stick was very amenable to nationalist thought, and it led to a general rise in nationalism. However, when Stalin got purgy, the Nazbols next ended up on the chopping block for anti-Soviet agitation. And that brings us to the modern Nazbol movement. So, right, in order to understand the nature of Nazbols, you first have to understand the most important figure to them, and that, at least for the modern era, is Eduard Limonov. Limonov was born on the 22nd of February 1943. Growing up, he despised school, evidenced by his numerous articles on the topic, and he had a pretty normal life for a Soviet child. It wasn't until the mid-1970s he did anything of note for the Nazbol movement. That thing was moving to New York. While in New York, he would work for a Russian-language newspaper and developed his unique politics. He became infatuated with nationalism and communism and became radicalized by each. He also became heavily involved with the punk subculture, which is why his folks looked so wacky in the 90s. He would leave America in 1980, calling it, quote, a damned outhouse bereft of culture on the outskirts of civilization, which is my new favourite insult. He would go to Paris after floating around stateless for 13 years, and would gain French citizenship in 1987. Then the Soviet Union blew up. After this point, Limonov's personal history becomes inseparable with the history of the National Bolshevik Party. The National Bolshevik Party would be founded in 1993 by Eduard Limonov and Alexander Dugin, of Eurasianist fame, and there would be a core aspect of the current firestorm that was the 1993 constitutional crisis. Okay, so a bit of quick context. 90s Russia was a dumpster fire, as in many magnitudes worse than even current Russia. This can be centered around the 1993 constitutional crisis, which is its own video. All that is important is that it led to a military crackdown and a semi-illegal seizure of power by Boris Yeltsin. And in this anarchy, you can see, oh my, yes, the National Bolshevik Party was a member of the National Salvation Front. And at this time, they were violently resisting Yeltsin's destruction of Russia, and this heavily impacted the fledgling party. Ultimately, the final attempts of the National Salvation Front to save Russia failed, and the NBP would begin their time as a political party. One of the most notable NBP members was Alexander Dugin, who would organize boycotts against Western goods, which were flooding Russia in the 90s. Dugin, however, would leave in 1998, which pushed the party firmly to the left as they denounced Dugin's ultranationalism, which is still true, but it is very odd for Nazbols. In 1994, Limonov was founded as the party's official news outlet. Limonov would be arrested in 2001 for terrorism and would remain in custody until 2003. The party would be banned for extremism in 2008. However, unfortunately, Nazbols don't take "please stop syncretic politics terrorism are an absolute abomination" as a valid answer. So they quickly reorganized into the Other Russia Party in 2010, which continues to this day. Limonov would pass away in 2020, and Other Russia would rename itself to the Other Russia Party of E.V. Limonov to honor its founder. So, what do Nazbols want? Well, for some national communists, they've got some surprisingly hot takes. The general gist of national bolshevism in the modern era is a very pro-Russian intervention, yet still socialist frame. Regarding specific policy, things get actually quite funny. Some policies of the Other Russia Party include violent revolution to remove liberals, such as Putin, make crimes against the environment equal to crimes against the state, establish Russian to be a culture and not racial, and finally, move the capital from Moscow to a city in South Siberia, most likely Omsk. So, what can we learn from Nazbols? Well, that 14-year-olds will believe anything about politics to appear edgy, and that's about it. If you like this video, subscribe. I rarely do stupid things like look at websites of banned Nazbol parties.